Critical Role has finally done it. After 2 years of waiting, Critical Role has once again teamed up with the god of dungeon mastering, Brennan Lee Mulligan, to once again return to the Calamity, the ancient war between the prime deities and the betrayer gods in Exandria lore, in their 3-part miniseries telling the story of the destruction of the flying city of Aeor, Downfall. And somehow, it's even better than I could have hoped for. Hello everyone, I'm Finn. Welcome back to FinFilms. Join me today as we discuss everything that happened in Critical Role Campaign 3, Episode 99, the first episode of the 3-part miniseries Downfall, where it is revealed that our amazing talented cast of characters are playing the freaking gods. So those of you familiar with my channel will know that I am a massive Critical Role lore nerd and a massive fan of Brennan Lee Mulligan. So seeing a return to the Calamity with Brennan once again taking the helm is an absolute dream come true for me. Before we get into breaking down the story and everything that happened in the episode, I just want to say that I could see how the Downfall miniseries might be a little bit hard for the casual Critical Role fan to kind of follow, as there is a lot of kind of like deep lore that is being referenced in this miniseries, particularly the intro segment. So I'll try to do my best to break down like as much as possible for I can. If you did feel like you were a little bit lost watching this series, I do highly recommend checking out my Critical Role lore series, where I break down a number of the topics and lore references in Critical Role, such as like the Calamity, the Age of Arcanum, all things like that. Go check that out. With all that out of the way, though, let's just get started. So this episode opens with this kind of very strange and almost like ethereal-like opening segment where we get a glimpse of the gods in their original state, in their original home world before they ever came to Exandria. In these scenes, they do these kind of interesting effects where the names of the gods were like distorted and blurred from Brennan's mouth, which a lot of people in the audience really complained about, but it does make a kind of a lot of sense if you look at it in like a lore aspect, as these are the true names of the gods in their original forms. So this effect is trying to convey that this knowledge of their true names of the gods is knowledge that mortals would not be able to comprehend. But luckily for those of you who complained about this and didn't like this, it didn't really last for very long in this opening segment. In this segment, we see that the gods lived in this almost like grove of possibility, this kind of like ethereal castle, as these forms of almost like ethereal light of endless possibility. They are almost childlike in a way, these beings of pure divine limitless potential energy, until suddenly things go horribly wrong. The gods then being forced to flee this world of possibility, their home, entering what Brennan refers to as the real. It seems the consensus from the community and what I can gather from what happened in these scenes is that this was all the result of Predathos hunting and chasing the gods, as we learned in Campaign 3 that Predathos is this god-eating entity, a kind of natural apex predator to the gods. The gods being called to the world of Exandria, possibly by the Luxum itself, this kind of being of light and pure limitless potential, similar to the gods in their original form, which brings in a lot of questions. They come to the world of Exandria, where they encounter a world of elemental chaos. As in the lore, the world of Exandria at this time when the gods arrive was controlled by the primordials, the world being a place of elemental chaos. We then hard cut away from this intro segment into our main story, which takes place 100 years into the Calamity being the grand war between the gods, the god brethren, the prime deities, and the betrayer gods. This war ultimately leading to 2/3 of the population of Exandria dead, and thrusting the world of Exandria into a kind of arcane dark age. Our story begins in a small town of Hawks Hill on the continent of Guisar, this town awaiting salvation from the last beacon of advanced magic in the world, the flying city of Aeor. From here we are introduced to our cast and their characters, where it is slowly revealed and teased over the course of our episode that our cast are actually playing the gods themselves in mortal flesh form. It being revealed that the gods took these mortal forms, living out mortal lives so that they could enter into the city of Aeor and ultimately stop it, the city of Aeor having created a barrier that prevents divine beings from entering it. Quick lore side note, in the Calamity, Aeor would ultimately develop a weapon that could kill a god, the Factorum Malleus. The prime deities and the betrayer gods, seeing this existential threat, decided to broker a truce, a temporary ceasefire, the two of them working together to stop Aeor from using this weapon and to eliminate any traces of it from history. This is the story then that is being told in this Downfall miniseries. Back to our characters though. First we have Ashley, who is playing a paladin named Trist, her character being the mortal embodiment of the goddess Sarenrae, or the Everlight. Next up we have Nick, who is playing the 15-year-old absolute giga multi-class character named Aiden, who is the mortal embodiment of Pelor the Dawnfather. After that we have Laura, who is playing the warlock Imara, who is the mortal embodiment of the Raven Queen, the goddess of death. After that, we have Taliesin, who is playing a female monk named Asha, who is the embodiment of the Wild Mother Melora, the goddess of nature. After that, we have Abu Bakr from House of the Dragon's fame, who is playing a sorcerer Aeormaton called Silaha, who is the embodiment of Corellin the Archheart. And finally, we have Noshir, who is playing an Earth Genasi barbarian known as the Emissary. This character not being a mortal form of the god, not being a god whatsoever, but a proxy for the lawbearer Arathis. I absolutely loved the first half of the show, the way that they introduced these characters and the way that they really teased out like their identity and the true nature of them. It was a lot of fun trying to follow this, trying to follow all the threads, pick up everything that was being put down, all of these hints, and trying to figure out who exactly these characters were and what gods they represented. Again, as I said, the gods have taken mortal form in order to gain entrance into Aeor, literally living out entire mortal lives to do this, some obviously longer than others, just to gain entrance to Aeor and get past their kind of divine repelling technology. Throughout this episode, there's like a ton of subtle references to the gods and the nature of the gods' relationships with one another. The fact that the Wild Mother is upset that Arathis has node showed them instead of proxy in their stead, as the two of them, Melora and Arathis, do basically have a kind of like couple-like relationship, so it makes sense that Melora, the Wild Mother, would be mad at Arathis for this, but it also makes sense that Arathis would do this, that Arathis would send a proxy in their stead, as Arathis is the god of civilization, and would probably not exactly be on board with the downfall, the striking down of Aeor, as they are the goddess of civilization. However, it very much seems like this emissary character is much more important than what is originally led to be, as this is later teased out in the episode, but we'll get to that later. As well, we see there is a bit of animosity, specifically between the Wild Mother and the Raven Queen, which does make sense, as the Raven Queen, literally hundreds of years prior to this episode, Downfall, rose from being a mere mortal mage to a god, striking down the former god of death, their sibling, by the way, from existence, erasing their name and anything about them from existence from all time, the Raven Queen taking their place as the god of death. So you could see why this might be a little bit of a fractious relationship between the gods and the Raven Queen, especially between the betrayer gods and the Raven Queen. As well, we see that Aeor and its people have kind of gone full authoritarian state out here, as we have to remember they are the last standing bastion of the Age of Arcanum, the last of the Flying Cities. The Aeorians believing in their kind of mage-like arrogance, a central theme to the EXU Calamity story, believing that they are the last hope for mortals as a whole, the last hope for arcane technology and magic, and they are the only ones who could truly defeat the gods and save mortal kind. However, this does kind of make sense if we look at it from the point of view of the Aeorians of Aeor, as they've seen the destruction that has been caused on Exandria at the hands of the gods in this grand war, which does a lot to explain Ludinus's motivation in Campaign 3. Of course, we also have to remember that ultimately the releasing of the Betrayer gods, the start of the Calamity, was kind of done at the hands of a mage, of Vespin Chloras, the hubris of a mage, though we also have to remember that he was ultimately manipulated by Asmodeus, so there's a lot of moving parts to this story, a lot of mortal grayness. Our party then board this Aeorian skyship, making their way into Aeor, where we learn that Salaha, aka the Archheart, has veered off from the original plan, embedding themselves within Aeor as an Aeormaton for some time now. Here on Aeor, the party meet up with another one of their god king, the Archmage Arcadia, who is actually the knowing mistress Ioun, the mortal embodiment of Ioun, who we learn has been on Aeor for the last 30 years and was the goddess who ultimately brokered this ceasefire with their betrayer brethren in order to deal with the Aeor problem. Speaking of the betrayers, we are then introduced to the four mortal forms of the betrayer gods who are accompanying our prime deity characters on this mission to stop Aeor. First, we have Father Milo, a priest of the Dawnfather, who is the mortal form of Asmodeus. Classic Asmodeus, always stirring, portraying himself as a priest of the Dawnfather, kind of just jabbing it into Pelor's side. Side note, absolutely love how Brennan plays Asmodeus. It's just amazing. It's top tier. If you watched EXU Calamity, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Next, a halfling woman named Umletta, who is Lolth the Spider Queen. And after that, a sickly turtle named Zahart, who is Torog, the god of torture. And finally, a barbarian woman named Tashar, who is most likely Grumsh, but could also be Bane. At this point, it's not entirely clear on which betrayer god this is. Here we get a super fun scene, what was probably my favorite scene of this entire episode, where these godkin, these family members, come together in this super awkward, like, family reunion dinner-like scene. In a lot of ways, it really reminded me of kind of that awkward dinner scene in the end of Season 1 of House of the Dragons, if you know what I'm talking about. We see that the gods disagree with how exactly to handle this problem of Aeor and their god-killing weapon. The betrayer gods, along with the Wild Mother and the Raven Queen, wanting to destroy the city of Aeor completely, as well as all knowledge of the weapon, while the rest of the prime deities want to try and destroy the weapon and all knowledge of it, but while not hurting the people of Aeor in the process. Of course, though, we ultimately know what ends up happening to Aeor, as ultimately it does come tumbling down to the ground, basically every single person that lived on Aeor dying in the process, except for a few. As well, here in these scenes, Asmodeus reveals a new piece of information, that possibly one of the prime deities has betrayed them in this mission, as a day prior, a celestial being, a angel if you will, has arrived to Aeor, being taken into the Genesis Ward. Again, Asmodeus being the classic Lord of Lies and just stirring the pot as per usual. There's a ton of questions I have surrounding this information, like is this possibly a betrayer god in disguise as a celestial, or did one of the other prime deities disagree with this plan altogether and sent this celestial to sabotage the plan, or was this one of the celestial beings acting alone to rebel against their gods, not believing in this plan, to take down the weapon and to save Aeor in the process? Only time will really tell what is going on here, but to me personally, it definitely seems like Asmodeus is up to something as per usual, and it would not shock me whatsoever if this celestial is actually a betrayer god in disguise. Ioun then reveals a 3-part plan to stopping Aeor's weapon. Part 1, stopping the Aravax protocol, basically Aeor's contingency plans should their city fall, which would have the plans of this weapon being sent all across Exandria so they can rebuild it again if the city were to fall. Number 2, destroying the engine which powers the machine that keeps Aeor basically cloaked from the gods. And number 3, the disabling of the Latimus Princeps, basically the repelling walls which keeps the divine from actually entering the city. Throughout these scenes, we have a bunch of really cool dialogue moments between these gods. We have to remember that these gods are siblings and have a very shaky, intricate past with one another. Asmodeus making a very pointed comment about 2 of the party members not being gods, obviously one of them being the emissary and the other being the Raven Queen, as Asmodeus despises the Raven Queen for ascending from a mortal god, destroying their original brethren, the god of death. If we remember back to EXU Calamity, Asmodeus was not very pleased when he learned what happened to his original godkin.
And you see the Lord of the Hells goes, "You're telling me that the god of death is a mortal?" I hate to say I told you so! Well, I cannot wait to meet this matron of ravens. To think, if they just listened to us and not given magic to them, my sibling whose name I can no longer remember might still be here.
As well, Asmodeus makes a dig at the Everlight, the 2 of them kind of having a long-standing feud. As we remember, during the Calamity, the majority of the Everlight's followers were slaughtered by the betrayer gods, basically wiping out much information and following of the Everlight, kind of relegating them to a lesser god. The Everlight, Sarenrae, not really gaining a substantial following again, really until the modern events of Critical Role and with Pike, Ashley's character. The relationship between the Everlight and Asmodeus is a super interesting one, which we really only know bits and pieces of, and there is a lot more animosity between these 2 gods than several of the others. As well, we get some interesting new information on Torog, specifically why he is so crazy, as it seems like his mind was almost like broken at having watched his home being destroyed by Predathos in the opening segment. Ioun as well is acting kind of sus, the goddess withholding information from her godkin brethren, though informing them that the emissary is extremely important to their mission, and that basically the emissary must be protected at all cost, though that's really all the info we get. Part of me does wonder if the emissary has some sort of connection with the primordials, but I guess only time will tell. All we know is that this character is apparently extremely important. Finally, our Godkin party split up into 3 groups to tackle these objectives ahead of them. Group 1 being Asmodeus, the Dawnfather, the Everlight, and Ioun. Group 2 being the Wildmother, Grumsh, Torog, and the Emissary. And Group 3 being Corellin, Lolth, and the Raven Queen. And this is where episode 1 of Downfall ends, and I'm just gonna be honest, guys, I thought it was absolutely amazing. Man, have I missed Brennan Lee Mulligan at the Critical Role table. Again, I think if you are a casual Critical Role fan, I think a lot of the goodness of this episode might have been lost on you, as you do need a kind of decent amount of knowledge of Critical Role lore to really get all of the references and to make sense of all of these kind of little interactions between the gods and the backstory between them all. I think every single one of the cast was absolutely amazing. To me, Nick as the Dawnfather and Abu as Corellin really stole the show for episode 1. I think both of them and their portrayals of these gods were just so freaking good. Nick, in particularly, his portrayal of the Dawnfather was just amazing. I love this kind of father-like beacon of light and hope kind of angle he takes in portraying the Dawnfather, which does also make sense when you remember that his mortal form is 15 years old and he is kind of naive as a way, and I think it makes for a really interesting foil for all these dark themes and destruction that has been brought into the world of Exandria, and to his own creations, this destruction being brought onto the mortals because of the kind of fallout of this war between gods. Laura also absolutely killed it as the Raven Queen. There was this really awesome scene kind of towards the beginning of the episode where we see this older man dying, basically dying of tuberculosis, some sort of sickness, and we see kind of Laura's character appear on the fringes of this conversation as the man ultimately succumbs from his illness, dying. And I just think the scene was so good. This idea of the Raven Queen, the goddess of death, basically ushering this person off onto the next life. It was just absolutely fantastic. So much stuff happened in this episode. It's hard to make sure that I referenced all of it. There was a bunch that I'm sure I didn't reference. I mean, Pervon, the Raven Queen's original champion, makes appearance in this episode, which was super hype, even if it was just kind of brief. Lolth makes a reference to the original split between the deities, specifically how they wanted to deal with the mortals, the betrayer gods believing that the mortals should have never been granted access to magic in the very beginning, the betrayer gods wanting to wipe them all out and basically reset, while the prime deities wanted to protect their creations. This was just so freaking good, man. And again, I can't get over kind of the weird sus vibes I got from Ioun. Part of me does wonder if this is a theory that I've seen in the fan base, that possibly Ioun is a betrayer god in disguise and this isn't actually Ioun. But again, only time will tell. I still stand by my statement that, in my opinion, Brennan is the best dungeon master ever to do it, especially right now. This combination of the amazing world building and lore of Matt Mercer with Brennan's amazing improv skills is hands down the best combo ever. This is why EXU Calamity was so good, that and the addition of the amazing cast members, and this is why I think that Downfall is going to be just as good, and it might even end up being better. Just like EXU Calamity, Downfall doesn't feel like I'm watching a Dungeons & Dragons game. It feels like I'm watching a play, almost live stage performance, especially because of how fleshed out and believable all of these characters feel and the way that these actors are playing them. As a hardcore Critical Role fan, a fan who has literally made lore explanation videos on this channel, I thought that episode 1 of Downfall was absolutely amazing. I thought that everyone was amazing, from Brennan's storytelling, the way he really encaptures you into the story, and the amazing performances of the actors. I really can't wait to see what major plot reveals and lore dumps we get in the next 2 episodes of this mini-series, and ultimately what ends up causing the downfall of Aeor. As at this point in our story, it seems like the original plan wasn't to strike Aeor down from the sky, but we know that this is what eventually does happen, so something has to go wrong to cause this. There has to be some sort of betrayal in this story that ultimately brings this to pass, that brings Aeor down to the ground, and I can't wait to see what happens in the next couple of weeks in the next episodes. I said this before in a video when they first announced that Downfall was going to happen, but this story has the potential to completely rewrite a lot of Critical Role lore as we know it. I mean, they've kind of already done it in that opening segment to some extent. Guys, if you did enjoy this video, learn something new, please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, as that is the easiest way to support me and to put this video into the algorithm. Let me know your favorite moments from Downfall episode 1 in the comment section down below, as well as your thoughts and theories for what is to come in this story. If you did enjoy this video, why don't you check out some of my other D&D and Critical Role content, which is on screen now. Again, I did a whole series going into detail on many aspects of Critical Role lore, like the Calamity and the story of Vesp and Korath, so I highly suggest checking those out, as I definitely think it will help you make better sense of all of these kind of little moments between the gods in this Downfall miniseries. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Drink your water, hug your mother. Until next time, peace, love, adu.